Imagine being so far from civilization that if something went wrong, no one could reach you for days. No roads. No islands. No ships on the horizon. Not even airplanes flying overhead. There is one place on Earth that comes astonishingly close to that description. A place so isolated that astronauts aboard the International Space Station are sometimes the closest human beings to it. Welcome to Point Nemo, the most remote location on our planet. Point Nemo isn't an island. It isn't a mountain. It isn't even visible. It's just a set of coordinates floating in the middle of the South Pacific Ocean. Officially known as the Oceanic Pole of Inaccessibility, Point Nemo lies approximately 2,688 kilometers, or 1,670 miles, from the nearest land in every direction. The closest pieces of land aren't even inhabited cities. They're tiny, isolated islands. To the north is Ducie Island, part of the Pitcairn Islands. To the northeast lies Motu Nui, a small islet near Easter Island. And to the south is Mar Island, off the coast of Antarctica. No matter which direction you travel, you're facing nearly 3,000 kilometers of open ocean before reaching solid ground. That's farther than the distance from New York to Denver. Or London to Moscow. Nothing but water. Point Nemo wasn't discovered by ancient explorers. In fact, nobody could have found it until modern computers existed. The location was calculated in 1992 by Croatian-Canadian survey engineer Hrvoje Lukatila, who used satellite mapping and computer algorithms to identify the point on Earth's oceans that is farthest from any coastline. It wasn't found by sailing there. It was found by mathematics. And despite its mysterious reputation, Point Nemo isn't marked by a buoy, a lighthouse, or any sign at all. If you sailed directly over it, you'd have no idea you had arrived. But why don't airplanes fly over Point Nemo? The answer isn't because flying there is forbidden. It's because almost no one has a reason to. Commercial airlines choose routes that connect cities while remaining close enough to emergency airports if something goes wrong. At Point Nemo, there are no airports. No runways. No emergency landing sites. Just thousands of kilometers of empty ocean. If an aircraft experienced a serious problem there, reaching land would be incredibly difficult. As a result, major commercial flight paths naturally avoid the region. Military aircraft rarely pass over it. Cargo flights almost never need to. The skies above Point Nemo are among the quietest anywhere on Earth. Ironically, while almost no airplanes pass overhead, something else does. Spacecraft. Point Nemo has become known as the spacecraft cemetery. When satellites, space stations, and cargo vehicles reach the end of their operational lives, engineers often guide them toward this remote patch of ocean. Why here? Because there's almost no chance of debris hitting people or populated areas. Over the decades, hundreds of spacecraft have been deliberately crashed into the waters surrounding Point Nemo. Among them are cargo spacecraft, aging satellites, and even Russia's massive Mir space station, which was safely deorbited into the Pacific in 2001. Some scientists estimate that the seafloor around Point Nemo contains more human-made space debris than anywhere else on Earth. It's the closest thing our planet has to a spacecraft graveyard. The ocean surrounding Point Nemo is just as extraordinary. Life here is surprisingly scarce. Most parts of the ocean receive nutrients washed in from continents or carried by powerful currents. Point Nemo receives almost none. The surrounding waters are considered one of the least biologically productive regions on Earth. Tiny plankton, the microscopic organisms that support nearly all marine food chains, exist here in much lower concentrations than in most oceans. With so little food available, larger marine life is also relatively uncommon. It isn't a lifeless desert. But compared with other parts of the ocean, it's remarkably empty. Perhaps the strangest fact of all is who might be closest to Point Nemo at any given moment. If researchers or sailors aren't nearby, the nearest humans are often not on Earth at all. They're orbiting roughly 400 kilometers above the planet aboard the International Space Station. The station regularly passes over the South Pacific. During some of those passes, astronauts are actually much closer to Point Nemo than any person on the ocean's surface. Think about that. The nearest people could literally be in space. Despite its eerie reputation, Point Nemo isn't cursed. It isn't surrounded by mysterious disappearances. There's no evidence of sea monsters or supernatural phenomena. Most of its mystery comes from one simple fact: distance. Humans evolved surrounded by other people. Cities, roads, villages. Even remote wilderness usually has something nearby. Point Nemo strips all of that away. It represents the absolute limit of isolation on Earth. A place where every direction looks exactly the same. Scientists occasionally pass through these waters while studying ocean currents, climate, marine ecosystems, and the chemistry of the deep Pacific. But very few expeditions specifically visit Point Nemo itself. There's little practical reason to go. Getting there requires long voyages across one of the most remote stretches of ocean on the planet. The cost is enormous. The logistics are difficult. And after all that effort, there's nothing to see. No island. No landmark. No sign announcing your arrival. Just endless blue water stretching to every horizon. Point Nemo reminds us how vast our planet truly is. Despite satellites, GPS, global shipping, and modern aviation, there are still places where human presence is incredibly rare. Places where silence dominates. Where the nearest neighbors might be orbiting hundreds of kilometers overhead. Where retired spacecraft rest on the seafloor beneath miles of water. In an age when nearly every corner of Earth has been photographed, mapped, and connected, Point Nemo remains something remarkable. Not because it's dangerous. Not because it's hidden. But because it's almost completely alone. And perhaps that's what makes it one of the most fascinating places on Earth, a location so isolated that the world's busiest skies simply pass it by, leaving only the ocean